That was really amazing.
Yeah. So now
I took part of that sleeping or like laying down, and it was really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was drawing what she was sharing, and that was helpful.
So, Shayla, we do have the video before we do the closing circle.
Oh, is that okay? Good. So you want to?
Yeah, David Stein was going to intro it.
Yeah. Do you want to click the? Do we click the record button?
Yeah, we're good.
And I'll get that queued up while David Stein introduces.
Yeah, so it's really exciting that we're going to be able to screen share a video from Jane and Paul Kearsley. And I had the fortune of meeting both Paul and Jane while I was at the Outback Farm. Paul led a class one quarter in the Outback Farm through Fairhaven College. And it was related to human design and ecology. And it was basically a PDC course in the Outback Farm over the course of the quarter. And during that time, we also got to go to Orcas Island and visit the Bullocks Brothers Permaculture Homestead Farm. For those of you that are not familiar with that permaculture farm out on Orcas Island, definitely recommend you check it out. It's an amazing place. But I guess that's where Paul Kearsley did, I want to say it was a 2 or 3 year internship, more than a couple years at that farm. And this was before he was teaching the course at the Outback Farm. And if memory serves correctly, I'm pretty sure he told me that's where he also met his wife, Jane. And I believe this film we're about to watch is about the property they've purchased with their extended family. And it's going to show the progress that they've been making over the last few years. So they're both amazing permies. Jane specializes in pruning and fruit tree pruning. And Paul, I mean, they both are just wonderful permaculturists. And it's going to be really cool seeing their designs in action with this video. So without further ado, let's watch it.
Campbell, and this is
Paul Kearsley.
And we're here at Queen Mountain Homestead. We've lived here for about 4 years with my sister and her family and some kids.
We all moved here to start a bit of a project. We are just outside Bellingham, Washington on 8 acres. And yeah, we are trying to do our best to steward this land back into a really healthy, rich ecosystem. We spent a bit of time looking for the right piece. There was a couple big factors that we wanted, maybe in particular the southwestern aspect, perennial water on site, and sort of a diversity of existing ecosystems. We didn't want to land in just a forest or just a field. So yeah, spent about a year with the 4 of us all collaborating and weighing different sites against each other until this one showed up. And yeah, basically went through the whole purchasing process and landed here in early June of 2016.
2016.
You know, we didn't really waste a ton of time. The garden that we're in right now went in the very first weekend that we were staying here. We built a hoop house, put up fencing systems, planted some trees, and sheet mulched in these annual beds, which we've been working ever since. And we've done a lot of incremental growth here. That fence line initially ran right behind us. It has grown out 3 or 4 times since then. We've done a lot of portable infrastructure, sort of versatile systems that we could sort of, you know, tinker with as we came to know the site. Our good friend Doug Bullock, I remember talking with him when we first landed here and telling him, you know, it hadn't really sunk in yet and it still felt really new and weird. And Doug kind of nodded and he said, yeah, it takes about 5 years. I was like, all right.
We're almost there.
Yeah, we've got 1 more year to figure out. So yeah, we kind of planned to have a fluid sort of design to the space. You know, some big things came together early, but we've had this really fluid design, and as we're getting into our 4th and 5th year now, things are really starting to click together. And yeah, happy to show you guys some of what we've come up with.
when we first moved here, this was all just knee-high grass, and we started with a little garden, and it stayed true to what we first put in, which is a lot of fresh eating food, kale and herbs, and beautiful things, cut flowers all around, and then some snack fruit too. So we've kept raspberries up here, although most of our raspberries are down below in what has become our storage crop area, which is zone 2 and 3 down below. So we've got squash and dry beans and a lot of potatoes down there.
In our Zone 1 garden, we also have a lot of ornamental plants, beautiful flowers, fun, interesting, different shapes of brassicas and kales, like this little weird Italian spindly one. And you know, some of it's for the diversity and sort of the stability associated with that, and then also some of it's just for looks. And you know, a mentor of ours, Yuriko Bullock, said the soul also needs to feed. And so in this Zone 1 garden, yeah, we spend a lot of time just kind of hanging out, and it's really important to us that we have fun, interesting things to kind of entertain us and nourish our connection with the space.
So where I'm standing is a bit of a transition between our kitchen garden, Zone 1, up above, and down below we have our bulk crops. But in between we had this steep slope. We talked about terracing it, and potentially could still in some spots, but we didn't really have the time or the energy to put in a bunch of rock terracing. So we did a little bit of an intermediary thing, got some trees going, and everything we planted here is totally drought tolerant and hasn't had irrigation the whole time it's been in the ground. So we've got a loquat, then a persimmon, and 2 peaches up there. And then on this side we've got figs and more peaches and a mulberry at the end, as well as gumi, which we really love eating, and a few other things that are filling in, phlomis and red hot poker. And we used logs as a temporary solution for retaining the base of the slope, and also to create this ramp which connects us from the lower garden up. It makes it easy to wheelbarrow materials. It also makes it easy for toddlers to ride their trikes down from the upper garden to the lower garden. And our plan is to be able to, as the logs get punky, swap them out for rock and just do it more incrementally. And then also just to allow the slope to be kind of steep and planted with some rugged plants that are able to hang on to the soil. And over here on this side of the path, where it's not quite as steep, we've been able to do a lot more sheet mulching. We started with a tiny triangle down here and then expanded and expanded and expanded, knocking out a lot of that grass, which is a growth inhibitor for a lot of the woody perennials, and replacing it with wood chips, some of which we chip ourselves, some of which are chips that we get from a local pallet company. So it's all mixed, but we've also been able to get a ton of mushrooms growing throughout the wood chipped area on this slope, which has been so exciting. Every time it rains we come out and just pick tons and tons of Burgundy stropharia. And then there's just kind of a hodgepodge over here. Every time we have an extra squash plant that doesn't fit in the rows, we pop it in the slope and it acts as a ground cover and then makes random pumpkins. Every time my sister needs to divide her lamb's ear, we grab some and throw it in the ground, and if it lives, great, and if it doesn't, then that's fine too. And the phlomis just keeps getting bigger and bigger, and we've got lots of these geum that we really like as well. So this is a fun area where we're protected from deer. The trees don't have to each have their own cage, which they do further out where we don't have the all-inclusive fencing. And we get to keep planting as the fence line expands within this area. But we just had a really great experience eating a bunch of peaches for the first time off of this tree here. Down in one of my favorite spots on the farm, the bean tunnel. It's dry beans they're runners, so they get tall, and we use a mix of rebar and just giant bamboo, because obviously the rebar is expensive and the bamboo is very cheap, but the rebar helps with the sail factor. These beams just create a massive wall that the wind can pick up and blow over. So learned the hard way on a couple poles, and reinforced now with lots of rebar, and then the bamboo's fun because it gets extra tall. This is what they look like. It's a variety from Yuriko Bullock on Orcas Island, originally from Japan, and it's called Kogamame. It is a scarlet runner relative. And then next to us, I am growing a bush bean as well, called the Marfax, which is a much smaller but also very handsome bean. And we're down here in the Zone 3 garden. We got a bunch of bell peppers, or forgive me, they're not bell peppers, they're bull's horn peppers, and they're very sweet, and they're growing in a hoop house down here. And we got squash next door. We can take a peek.
So here are those squash that Jane was talking about, and we're growing a couple of different varieties here, all yeah, winter squash that we like to store, small enough to work with, and yeah, just some tasty varieties like the varieties of kabocha and some pie pumpkin and such. The interesting thing about the squash patch, though, is how it kind of fits into that incremental growth of the site that we've been talking about. This squash patch last year was sheet mulched and held all of our nursery stock. The nursery stock overwinters in giant piles of manure, which get, you know, piled up against the pots to insulate them through the cold. And then come springtime, we have all of this excess manure in the nursery. And so if you come this way, I can show you, that excess manure gets broken down, spread out, sheet mulched, planted with squash, and then transitions into other annual staple crop or zone 2 production. And then as far as the nursery system goes, this is where we are now, and in yeah, probably 2 months, in October or so, we'll bring in a bunch of manure and we will insulate all of these pots with the notion that the fence line is going to expand. This will turn into production area, and all of that manure that was insulating the plants will just be reintegrated back into the soil. So we've got this fun kind of process of growth and expansion of the garden that involves holding nursery, transitioning into really heavy feeders like squash, and then once all of that initial nutrient breaks down, transitioning into something like beans or potatoes, or sometimes perennials or onions and other such things. So here we are at what we call the bone gate, and we're not above a little bit of woo-woo here. These are the bones of various animals who we've known and loved, and this helps deter animal entry into the garden, and plus kind of adds a fun, maybe fun, whimsical aesthetic to the site. But more importantly, we've got this fencing system which we've sort of stumbled into over the years working on this land. Like I said, we've used a very incremental system of growth, and kind of being able to assess what we can accomplish or what we can take on in a year, and then maybe stay in that stasis for another season in order to kind of understand the maintenance associated with it. And then when we're comfortable and feel like things are established, then we can continue expansion. So for that system, we've been using what's known as critter fence. This is a really heavy-duty black plastic fence. For the most part, it's very invisible. It's pretty, it blends in really well. You just kind of tend to look right through it rather than looking at it. And this critter fence system comes at about $1 a roll, and if you factor in the 12-foot T-stakes, we've fenced off probably, I think, 800 linear feet of fencing for about $2 a foot. We harvested some heavy posts from some old trees on the site, and yeah, the big important piece about this fence, though, is that it's really effective, yet not permanent. And so at various different stages in the past 4 years, the fence has moved. It used to be back in the garden a little further. It came out and this gate was installed. And actually, if we look down the line here, this inside corner is our next plan for expansion, and the fence is going to swing out. We'll relocate the post out there, and then this whole area where we've been sort of acquiring and dumping some organic fill and such from different projects on the site and through landscaping clients off the site. We've been filling in this little bit of a pit here, and now the fence line is going to move to incorporate this, and then this will get that same sheet mulch holding nursery into, or sheet mulch holding nursery squash production, and then over 3 seasons be integrated into our Zone 3 staple crops.
So I learned at the Bullock's homestead, primarily from Sam Bullock, how to do some deer caging. Trees can just get annihilated by deer so quick, and so going the extra mile to keep them off is very important at the outset. Here we have what is called Welded Remesh. You can pick it up at any Lowe's in your region, and it is a little bit stronger than a lot of the caging that is common to most people. Each joint here is welded, so that's a little bit stronger, and it's used in foundations, but we've repurposed it for tree caging. And then on the top we have a browse protection from deer noses that like to stick in and get whatever greenery they can. So this is chicken wire. In other places we've used other materials, scrap that we had, finer mesh. But the chicken wire is very nice, works well, it's easy to wrap. And then we have J-clips, which are pretty common for pet enclosures, bunnies. Any bunny keeper will know a J-clip. We have to keep our cages on the ground because in the winter we range our pigs along the orchard rows. This is our sacrifice area, if you've come across that term. You have to have an area where you can keep it well mulched to take care of wet conditions and make sure you don't have the livestock in a lot of mud. So we move our pigs along, they do a bunch of weeding all winter long. Anything that's grown up, they take it out, and then we mulch with wood chips behind them. However, if we didn't have the cage on the ground, then we'd risk especially when the trees are very little, this beauty plum is getting to a point where it's not as vulnerable to the pigs digging it up. However, pigs are very strong and they do what they want. So if we didn't keep the caging low on the ground, then we'd have the pigs up against the trees doing their darndest. So yeah, we've got that, and then we've got another layer of protection inside the cage. We've got a vole guard, and that's a little bit of hardware cloth down there around the trunk. You want to keep that low and on the ground, because what happens in the winter, especially if you have a well mulched ring around your tree, is that voles will get very cozy and they'll come up against your tree and nibble off the bark and get at that tender cambium, which is the living tissue of the tree, and chew it apart. And many a orchardist has lost trees to voles, so that's a pretty critical piece of protection in our area. What else? Oh, we've got our drip irrigation. So some of the trees in this orchard space are drought tolerant, and once mature will be taken off irrigation entirely. Other things will require irrigation throughout their young lives and into their early maturity. So we've got a lot of this inline drip is what we use. So we've got 1/2 inch pipe coming down the row, and then just a loop of the inline drip around each tree.
So out here, getting into zone 3, 3.5, and actually zone 4's just over there, we're working on getting our orchard established. Like we said, we've only been here for 4 years. This was all a hay field. Our vision is sort of a diverse collection of different fruit trees: figs, peaches, pears, plums, apples, and so on. But in order to get those established, there's going to be a number of years, and there's going to be a lot of space before those trees are fully occupying this zone. So in the meantime, we've got a couple different strategies out here that have been working out really well. As you can see, we've got kind of a bit of a mess out here. We're far enough away that things can get a little shabby, but you can see that we're growing a squash, kind of rambling over this trellis. It looks like a delicata or something similar. We've got beans climbing around. There's probably some potatoes in there, and also quite a bit of sunchokes. We've actually come to really love the sunchoke for a couple of reasons. It has a reputation for being super tenacious. and then also overwinters pretty well and has turned out to be a really awesome source of pig fodder for us. And that's actually what all of this is a big belt of forage that's between the rows of the fruit trees to feed these here hogs. So we keep American guinea hogs. We've got around 4 to 6 of them at any time of the year. And actually, we're standing in the middle of a pasture row. This pasture row grows up some pretty healthy grass, and we range the pigs on here from, say, late March all the way up through mid-August or so. And we rotate them around in a few different paddocks, and yeah, they just, the pasture pig, or the American guinea hog is a pasture pig, so they can graze on grass, and we basically stop feeding them for about 4 or 5 months of the year. Then, when we run out of pasture, we need somewhere to hold the pigs so that they aren't disturbing the pasture too much. We're learning how to maintain a healthy space, maintain a healthy productive pasture, which is sort of its own discipline in and of itself. So when we're not, when we don't want the pigs on pasture, we park them in these forage belts where they are right now, and they'll range here basically from late August into March. And these forage belts get churned up. The pigs do a lot of rooting. The pigs will do a lot of rooting. They'll dig up the sunchoke roots. They'll eat the whole sunchoke plants. They'll find squash, beans, potatoes, and all those different things. So they get to be entertained. They get to be pigs. And then on top of that, as they're making this disturbance, as Jane said, they're protecting the fruit tree from the encroaching grass and pasture. So we've got kind of this nice little system where the sacrifice area for maintaining the livestock and preserving the pasture is simultaneously the development area for both pig forage as well as the establishment of what are zone 4 nut trees and all of the fruit trees that we were just looking at.
So there's a lot going on here, and we'd be remiss to not mention all the people who have helped us out here. It takes a lot of friends and family, not just to help plant trees. We had a big orchard planting party when we did that 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, but also just people to enjoy it with. It makes it so much better being here and being able to have potlucks and bonfires, and so that's the folks that live here with us, my sister and her family, and then also all of the friends who come over and people who are curious about learning more about what we're doing. It's been really meaningful to have those relationships and share this place and the animals and the plants and the food with a community of people.
The family structure has been such a big part of what we've been able to accomplish here. It's one thing to have a bunch of people sort of living together, but the fact that there are effectively the 4 adults who all share a common vision really allows us to multiply our capacity and abilities. We all get together on large maintenance projects, large installations and such. We're all collaborating on terms of the overall site design and how energy and resources are flowing through. And we're also all sort of drawn to our own sort of specialties. Ryan is particularly interested in mowing and maintaining the pasture and has been doing a great job of it over the past few years. Liz is very skilled in the garden and also likes doing a lot of the work with the animals. Jane is, a master gardener, obviously. And then I end up doing a lot of shop work and construction and such, and sort of filling in little holes here or there.
And we have our games specialists. If we didn't have the kids, we'd probably get too serious and burnt out. So it's very important to have some children on site who force us to have little pickup soccer games. And there's been a lot of Foursquare recently on the driveway.
And a grandma and grandpa nearby who are able to mind our toddler and hang out with the kids and so on. And it's, I think, something that really often gets looked over, and Jane said it well earlier, we can have all of the technical aspects and all of the design features all really well laid out on paper, and we can have the different technologies and we have the different biology and genetics and everything like that, but a really important part is those invisible structures and the social relationships, and it's very challenging and hard work, and at the same time it is the the most rewarding when we really start to collaborate and see what we can what we are co-creating. And yeah, we've just walked through all of that, and thanks for spending the time and checking it out. Hope that you learned something, and if you're in the Bellingham area, give us a ring, Queen Mountain Homestead, and yeah, good luck with all your projects.
Have fun.
That was a great video, huh?
I agree, David.
Woo!
Yeah.
They have some pretty cool systems in place, which I thought was really neat. Like, you know, just the fruit trees and the pigs, and like having that all thought out is really nice planning. Really thoughtful.
And they're in less than 5 years, which is kind of cool. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think this
Yeah,
makes.
Paul.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Paul teaches a design course, industrial design, actually at the university. So he's always been really good at being able to draw out his ideas, design methods. And it's clear they've definitely learned the importance of, in their design processes, to make it into incremental phases. And I think that was just so clear in their success in the videos. And I know for me, someone who's new to a lot of this in the grand scheme of things and always dreaming about my future property, it's just so helpful to know going into it, to think about it in that incremental planning step, because it's so easy to think about all the visions in permaculture, but then breaking it down in that way really promotes that gradual, each year increasing productivity, rather than trying to plant too many fruit trees and losing half and getting burnt out, you know?
Yep. I just want to point out, if people haven't made the connection yet, Paul Kearsley is the illustrator for the book Practical Permaculture that came out a couple years back, authored by Jesse Bloom and Dave Bainline. And they were all at the Bullocks as interns. And Paul is just a very gifted illustrator and has a really unique ability to convey a message through illustration and on paper. And that comes across in not just his illustrations, but his personality and the way he approaches design in the landscape. And if any of you have looked at the book Practical Permaculture, it's probably one of the best books for laying out strategy to design process that I've seen out there. It really goes through step by step on how you do your observe and interact, and how you put all the pieces of the puzzle together to not just come up with an end finished design, but how you do the phased in implementation, maintenance, and dealing with harvest and yield and stuff throughout that whole process. So, and what he didn't show on there, which I was kind of hoping to see, is some of his potential water systems. He's right at the base of a mountain, and I actually helped do a water survey and stuff on his land, and I looked at the base of the mountain and some of the clay there, and I'm like, if you dig down here 10 feet, you're going to have a spring, and you're going to have a year-round pond. And sure enough, he dug that following spring or summer, and hit water. It filled up immediately, and now they're water secure. They've just got water coming out of the base of this mountain, and that's at the top of their site, and they could reticulate it down all the way through that whole system, which is on his whole plan. But again, it's phased implementation. Where Jane said they could do terraces through there, that's all part of that planned water course that will come down through their system as it gets established and they have time.
Yeah, and just one more way to praise Paul is, when I was in school, he actually also helped this like permaculture club on campus. And each week, we would get college kids to show up on the Outback farm, and he would inspire us all in the nature of permaculture to be designers of our environment in a way that promotes stewardship of the land, stewardship of each other. So yeah, wish Paul could be here right now so we could be giving him our praise, but wonderful guy, and I'm happy we were able to share that video. And I found it very educational, so I hope you all did too.
Yeah, I was hoping to see Paul and Jane both. They both have such amazing talents and are really a blessing to the community. And they've done a lot of projects. They had a small business for a while called, what was it, Homestead Habitats or something like that, where they did design installations of edible landscaping for people, and demonstration sites and for school gardens. And so they've really done a lot of community outreach and volunteer kind of projects as well.
They're the dream permaculture team.
Yeah, I was interested at the structures that they used and the fencing and the hog panels and the little vole guards, you know, around the bases of the trees. Those are things that I might, you know, I might implement some of those along the way.
Absolutely. And it's those little things, I think, where you suffer enough losses to learn from that. But for me, being able to learn that information and not have to then endure many fruit trees lost to these pests, I'm like, okay, I'll additionally add that hardware cloth around the base and obviously increase its size for growth of the tree. But yeah, that's the wisdom that I love when connecting with wise permaculturists and people who just have that wisdom. So I thank all of you.
I really liked his deer fence that you could barely see, and that he had scavenged his own posts. I loved it. What do we use around here that's so ubiquitous? The chain link, the 8 foot chain link fence in a rectangle, and that's the garden. It seems so, I don't know, not very creative. So I loved his idea.
Absolutely.
I like the way he definitely included a lot of the variation of permaculture in the fact that he mentioned age diversity and just the other social elements in such a small space, and shared that importance.
My favorite part was the like slow, small solution of having that incremental growth too. It was so awesome to make it be a manageable amount to grow every year. Yeah, and if we have a few more comments in this vein, we have a little over we have 40 minutes exactly for our kind of closing gratitude session before we get to listen to Prem.
I would put a little plug and a little history. Paul and I and a couple other people, including Penny Livingston, we're going to do a full permaculture design course here this year. And part of it would have been at Paul's place, part of it would have been here at Inspiration Farm, part of it would have been at Outback. And so it was like every weekend we would meet at a different place, and then we do a week camp out here at Inspiration Farm for the design process. Well, because of COVID, that didn't happen. But stay tuned in the future. This can definitely be a possibility. And 3 of the locations that Raintree fortunately came up and videoed are key locations to host that PDC.
Yeah, I think you should do one online. Penny said we're doing them online now, so.
We had 21 people signed up for the course and we had to cancel it. And we were like, oh, can we do this online? And Terry Kempton, she was on here earlier talking about food justice stuff. She's like, oh God, I'm having to switch everything online. It was just too big of a hurdle to do online. But fortunately, we got an invitation from Andrew Millison from OSU. And he said, like, any of your students that were in the course that really want to do it, they can enroll in our course through us, and you can mentor them through the course. So out of the 21 students, we had 3 that chose to do the online course, and the rest of them there's so many online things. They all want the hands-on, personal relationship kind of experience. So it works for some people, but not everybody. It's not the same as, like you say, somebody said in the chat, oh, you need a little map to see what's going on because they're just walking around and you can't really tell. Well, if you're on site, you can tell, and you get a better feeling for really the whole scope of the system.
Yeah, for anyone who wants, Raintree's website is raintreenursery.com. So you can go on there, shop for your fruit trees and berries. They did, you know, they provided us with these wonderful videos, and they also are a sponsor this year, which is really great. So, you know, feel free to shop trees with them. Yeah, they're great. And I've mentioned this a few times, especially after we watch one of the Raintree videos. I want you to know that they will be posting these on their social media, on their YouTube, etc. So this will all be something that you can watch over and over again in the future. So I don't know how we'll handle that on our side as far as providing that information to people. We'll have to talk about that as a board, but it is their media to share, so we'll have to figure that out. But anyways, support Raintree. They're great.
Yeah, they're also very, very knowledgeable plants in the Pacific Northwest. So even if you don't buy stuff from them, but you have questions, they're more than happy to help you out with any specific question.
Right, and they were the sponsor a couple years ago at our convergence. And I buy almost all of my plants from Raintree.
Yeah, Raintree sponsors almost every year. Even if we're down in Oregon, they sponsor the convergence. And Burnt Ridge Nursery too. This year I don't think we reached out to very many people, but yeah, we have some pretty good nurseries here in the Pacific Northwest that, you know, are very knowledgeable.
Between Burnt Ridge and Raintree, I think if it weren't for the two of them, I wouldn't have the wonderful orchard that I have. They're both, I've bought almost all my trees from them, one or the other, and they're so knowledgeable. The amount of information they've given is just, it's allowed us to have a wonderful orchard.
Okay, I have to give a shout out for Bullock's Homestead too. They're actually having a plant sale this weekend and next weekend. It's their fall plant sale, and they're plant geeks. They've done tons. They're not as big a commercial nursery as Raintree or others, but oh my God, they have some really unique cultivars and some things that are my all-star plants that I've got here going at Inspiration Farm. So I know it's a little hard to get to the Bullocks and they don't ship, but it's worth the effort. I'll just say that.